The folks at home may know who we are.
I'm Greg Cohan from Jocelyn Lesser, project manager.
Christine DePalma, also from Jocelyn Lesser.
Jeff Luxembourg with Jocelyn Lesser.
Charlie Hay from Tappé Associates, the architects.
Loxie Calm, Superintendent of Schools.
Michael Barney, School Building Committee, Citizen at Large.
And Mike Mackin, I'm with Lunenburg School Committee, and I am the chairman of the School Building Committee.
Greg Roy, School Building Committee, Citizen at Large.
Dave Matthews, Board of Selectmen.
Mark Erickson, Finance Committee.
Brian Spadafino, high school principal.
John Londa, Director of Facilities, Lunenburg Public Schools.
Great. Welcome all this evening. I particularly want to welcome Greg Roy as our newest member. Thank you for joining us. First order of business is approval of minutes from the August 28th, 2013 meeting. Are there any comments, changes, additions, deletions? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Next order of business is monthly approvals. This is the August 2013 Jocelyn Lesser and Associates invoice and the August 2013 Tappé Associates invoice. If you want to just take a minute, you'll see what those amounts are. On the Jocelyn Lesser, we're looking to approve the amount of $13,000.
That's correct.
And for Tappé Associates, which includes the continuation of all the work around the feasibility study and schematic designs, which includes some work on studying hazardous material, geotechnical, site survey, and schematic designs, is $38,523.
Correct.
And that's coming around. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Project update. For those at home who may not have been watching some of the previous meetings or some of the meetings that we've held, over the past month and a half or so, we've held over 40 meetings. We've attended, members of the School Building Committee have attended, along with the superintendent, all of the open houses in town. We attended the professional development day that we had for the teachers last Wednesday to explain the project to our staff. We have met with the Board of Selectmen. We have met with the Planning Committee. We will be meeting with the Finance Committee on October the 10th. We are at a phase in the project. We were, as you remember, we've completed our feasibility study and were approved for our preferred solution of a new 6 through 12 high school by the MSBA in June of this year. The high school, again, will be a 6 through 12 middle high school containing 167 square feet with a design capacity of 820 students, which is capable of holding much more. 820 is based on a 85% utilization rate. So you can imagine that the building is capable of serving over 900 students should the need exist in the future. The MSBA is in the business of building schools that will accommodate folks' needs for at least 50 years. At this juncture, we have completed our design folks have completed schematic designs, and the process to come to estimation has been completed by the owner's project manager as well as the contract manager. So with that, I think this would be a good place, Jeff, for you to start walking us through the estimation process first.
Sure.
And then where the numbers were.
This evening, we're going to be looking to wanting to submit the schematic design package. So what that includes there's a set of drawings and specifications at the schematic design level, which sets the floor plans and enough detail of the document in order to be able to do cost estimates. So we had two independent cost estimators do cost estimates, PM&C, who's the architect's cost estimator, and Shawmut Design and Construction, who is our selected CM. And Mike Kearns is here this evening from Shawmut. The two estimators, we met multiple times with the estimators to look at those costs and then evaluate those costs. So you have several documents in front of you. One is a summary of the costs, which I'll walk through first. It looks like this. And then there's a more detailed 11 by 17 sheet, which is the required form that the MSBA requires, and then there's a cost estimate reconciliation, which I think is also before you. So that one looks like this. So those three documents are what you have this evening, and I'm going to start with the summary, and then I'll go backwards to give you the detail, because I think it's easier to understand if I start with the summary. And as I go through this, if people have questions, this is a somewhat complicated program of way the MSBA funds this, and so some of the things are not always so obvious. So feel free to chime in and ask a question. I'd rather do that than have people not following where I was going. So I'm going to start with the summary. Is this going to come up on the screen? Do you know?
Mention the name of the document.
Okay, so the name of the document is the Schematic Design Total Project Budget Summary. Anybody watching at home, we have an electronic version of this, which at some point will be flashed on the screen, I believe. The first item is the feasibility study, which was funded at a rate of $750,000 originally. We have been very judicious in the use of those funds, and so the total committed to date for the feasibility study is $619,057. Because we've come to the end of the feasibility study phase, further expenditures that allocated to that line would not be reimbursable by the MSBA, but they do allow you to move the balance to any of the items below. So basically, we've adjusted this number to 619 and moved the numbers to below. It doesn't matter which line we actually moved it into. The total so when we get to the total project budget and the local share, that includes this $750,000. That $750,000 has already been authorized. So you're, in reality, when you go to town meeting for the remaining appropriation, you could subtract out that $750,000 that has been previously authorized. But we have not done that, but I'm just making you aware of that. Administration is, the overall management of the project is at $1,924,000. That is under the MSBA caps for that item. Architecture and engineering is at $5,175,000. That is also under the caps for that item. The amounts for the architect include what's called basic services, and then there are some additional services, which it includes, which is a monitoring of hazardous material removal when we demolish the building. That is included within that. Geotechnical and geoengineering costs are included within that. Site surveys included within that. Wetlands and traffic study. Those are additional to the basic services, but the summary number here includes that. When we get to the detail, you'll see how those are broken out. As we did when you selected and authorized the CM at risk, there were two parts to that. There was schematic design and then the rest of the design, and that's a total of $160,000. That's a separate line item, and you see that on your summary sheet. The construction costs are a total of $60,261,632. That is the architect's cost estimate The CM's is a little bit higher, about $1 million higher than that, but the MSBA requires the architect's cost estimate to be used for the basis of that. The CM is aware of that and knows that that would be a build to budget, and we do need to build to that budget. Well, we'll talk in a minute about the reconciled estimate, and that's the construction number. That does not include the greenhouse. As the committee is aware, that greenhouse is an excluded MSBA cost because it's not something that everybody has, and therefore it's an excluded cost, so it's separated out, and it's also separated out on their details as well. There are some miscellaneous project costs. They include utility fees, which we've carried. Those are back charges at $25,000. That is not a reimbursable expense, so we purposely did not put a lot of money into that. Worst comes to worst, if it's higher than that, if there are any utility back charges, we could also take that out of a project contingency, which we'll get to in a minute. There is construction testing in there at $120,000. That's for things like we do concrete cylinders to make sure the concrete meets specification, anchor bolt testing of steel, compaction testing, and a range of other testing that's required that are all standard as part of a project. So we have a line item for that. We put $25,000 into moving costs, which is basically moving teacher items from the old building to the new building. The building is going to have new furniture, new technology, so we won't be moving a lot of existing furniture over, but we will be moving over some of the teacher elements. That is also not reimbursable, so we have not carried a lot of money there because they would have excluded that as well. The furnishing and educational technology is reimbursed by the MSBA. They allocate and allow a cap of $1,200 per student for furniture, furnishings, and equipment, and $1,200 for educational technology, computers, and the like. So we have carried the exact number that they will reimburse, so they will reimburse their share of that amount. In addition to that, the MSBA allows for a construction contingency that's potentially allowable, meaning that it would, if it's an unforeseen condition or an error or an omission, these are typical elements that you would use for contingency. They would reimburse that. If the town were to add scope to the project after this gets approved by the MSBA, they will not reimburse on those items. So traditionally, only about a third, a little more than a third is reimbursable depending on the project. Again, there's no requirement to spend the contingency. It's there for unforeseen conditions and items that typically come up in construction, but you don't have to spend it.
Is that a formula?
It's 5% of the construction cost for a new building, which this is. There is something called potentially eligible owner's contingency, and that's 1% of the construction cost. And those are soft cost additions, either furniture or equipment or technology that you miss, but those would not be reimbursable because they're extra scope. Additional architectural services, if we were to have some problem related to the soils and it require more hazmat monitoring or more geotechnical engineering, that would be reimbursable, typically reimbursable, and that's what that $600,000 could cover. And additional moving costs, but that would not be reimbursable, and additional utility back charges, but also, again, not reimbursable. And I'll go into the reimbursable part in a little bit more in a second. So all that adds up to is $74,235,771. We have said that we expected a range of 70 to 75, so we're within that range. We are on the higher side of that range. But in order to do that, we'll talk about that in a second, there was some value engineering that went into this to make sure we stayed within that range. The MSBA takes all of that, and that now points you to the 11 by 17 spreadsheet with yellow, different yellow cells. The yellow cells just mean you can't touch those cells. It doesn't have any significance other than that. So the budget you saw is exactly the budget that's on this sheet. It just has a little bit more detail. So when you get to the feasibility study, it has all the 4 lines of the feasibility study. When you get to administration, it has all the lines for owner's project manager by all the phases, and then it has a line for advertising and printing. That's this
That's a sheet.
This sheet here. Thank you, Greg. And it has a $45,000 line for bid printing and advertising. We used to actually have to spend a lot more, but a lot of people are now downloading drawings rather than printing them, but we still have to print a large number of drawings. Other administrative costs are for a structural peer review. We want to make sure that the design of the architect has an independent structural engineer looking at that. That's an MSBA requirement, and that's covered under that line. And this, you'll see in a moment, you get extra reimbursement for having a green, quote-unquote, school, a sustainable design. And to do that, LEED or Mass CHIPS, which are the two agencies that will review that, require registration fees, and that's covered under that line. And those are reimbursable items. The architecture and engineering fees, you'll see 5 lines, one for design development, construction documents, bidding, construction contract administration, and closeout. Those are the different phases of the design process, each of which the MSBA is involved with, and we submit submittals at the end of design development, twice during construction documents. We submit the final bid documents to the MSBA. We submit during construction administration. They come out every 2 months and monitor work. So not only are you folks clearly involved on a regular basis in the review of this project, but the MSBA also comes out. So there are another set of eyes making sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted and everything's being done per the requirements of the program. The next section here on the first page is the architectural additional services. Those are the hazmat materials and hazmat monitoring as well as included there. Geotechnical and geoenvironmental engineering, site survey, wetlands, and traffic studies, and they will give us a specific proposal. The committee will get to see that before they vote on that. And I think you had that as part of the feasibility study as well. The next line is the pre-construction line for the CM, as I mentioned. And then we've taken the cost estimate, which has been broken down, and we're going to go through that momentarily. But on this one, there's what's called uniformat, is a summary of the other sheet. And it gives you the things broken down into things like foundations, exterior closure, interiors, services like conveying systems, plumbing, HVAC, fire protection, electrical, equipments and furnishings in the building. Just so I mentioned earlier, there was furniture and equipment and technology. There are 2 types. If you took the building and you turned it upside down, the stuff that falls out is the movable furniture. That's the one I said they reimburse at $1,200 per student, and the technology, the same thing. The furniture that's built in, the casework, technology built in are covered under other lines, and those show up here, so you see that as well. And that, through furnishing ends the building part of that, and that's important, and I'll explain that in the building. That's the building itself. Then you have several lines for building demolition. That's taking down the existing building and removing the hazardous materials before you do that. As I think you all know, but given that we're on TV, anytime you remove asbestos and hazardous materials, it's built completely under containment, and so no hazardous materials ever leak out. They build that under containment. Everything is bagged up. It's hauled to specific landfills for that purpose, and then they remove all that containment, and then they take the building down. So there's no danger or to anybody when they remove hazardous materials. Those are separated out from the building costs, and those are reimbursable as well, except for VAT tile. VAT tile is vinyl asbestos tile. Those have been removed from your corridors, and they've been removed from most schools throughout the state, but some tile remains because if it's in good condition, it's not of any danger until you go to demolish the building, and then you do need to remove it. The MSBA, however, has decided that because some schools have removed all of their asbestos tile and some haven't, that in order to be fair, that the cost for removal of asbestos tile would be not reimbursable. So you'll see in the second column over that 241,800 is also listed there because they do exclude the cost for removal of asbestos tile. Then the next 4 lines are all related to the site. And they include site improvements, site electrical, mechanical, utilities. Those are all necessary. Similar, however, to the idea that throughout the state, there are different number of fields. So in order to be fair, they've decided that 8% is a fair reimbursement cost. When you take the building cost, multiply it by 8%, those were the items through furnish up to and through including the furnishings that are fixed in the building. You multiply that by 8%, it sets a cap on what they will reimburse for sites. And that's the MSBA's way to say that in order to be equitable throughout the state, that, you know, some people have one field, some people have no field, some people have multiple fields, that's the most we'll reimburse. If you want additional fields, we will allow them into the project, but we will not pay for those, and we will exclude the cost of those. This particular project has more fields than normal, I would guess. So there is a scope exclusion. Having said that, we have done, this is now the 14th project that we've gotten to this stage on, and 13 of those 14 projects actually have exceeded the 8%. So I would say that 8% is not the average school. It is a number and it defines something, but we've only seen one project have no cost. That site had no fields whatsoever and was on a very, very small parcel. So I would, the $2 million exclusion here is about normal for the site exclusion. So basically they're saying that, look up the number here, the site cost, pull this up, I apologize because I thought the number would jump off the page, but I don't normally look at it. It's right there. There it is. 5,404,686 are the site costs. The reimbursable costs are $3,315,918, leaving a balance of the $2,088,768. You're going to see in a minute that had that been less, there's another number that overrides that number, so it doesn't matter that much given the specific scope of the fields and like. So they then take that, that's the actual cost before there are additional costs for insurance, bonds, and that kind of thing. So you add the VAT costs and the scope together, it comes up with $2,330,000, and then there is another $300,000 or $400,000 in general conditions and overhead and profit related to those costs. And then what happens is the MSBA has set a limit of $275 for the cost of construction that they felt was the number. They set this about 2 or 3 years ago, was the cost of what their average cost of construction was on a typical project. They have not increased that number. They did a study this year and determined that they think it's still in the statistical median of what they're doing, and therefore they feel that they want to leave that number as is. They have a limited budget, and by keeping that cost at a constant, that allows them to do more projects in the state. Obviously, MSBA doesn't make any money because any money they save goes to other projects throughout the Commonwealth. So they have for at least the next year kept that number to be constant. They do allow you to add to that number the cost of demolition and the cost of the VAT tile because they're excluding it elsewhere. So when you add all of those costs in, that number increases to $291.22. However, the cost of schools construction these days, with the economy going up and there being a lot of building going on, we have estimated the cost here at $360.85. So it is higher than that number. And similar to the 8%, we have not seen, we've done 2 other projects recently, any numbers approaching the 293. They're all in the 340 to 360 range. We had one one 2 weeks ago at $372. So this is what it does cost to build the scope that you have. Obviously, if you had less fields or some other things, that the cost could go down potentially. But for what we understand the needs are, we were upwards of, I think it was 390 when we started with, we'll get to the VE in a minute, with working out the cost reconciliation. So we have brought it down to $360 a square foot, and so we are a little bit higher than the MSBA allows. So what they do to do that, and this is the complicated formula, is when you see the construction budget, you'll see that our construction costs are at $60,261,632. They calculate $275 per square foot times the $167,000 per square foot. They then multiply that times the 275. They add to that the cost of the demo and abatement and come up with a number, which is, that number equals $48,633,322. So that's 275 times 167, which equals $45,925,000. They add the cost of demo and abatement, which is $2,708,322, coming up with $48,633,322. They take the difference between that and the $60 million, and you come up with $11,628,310. So if the excluded site cost went down, they would increase what's called the overall excluded construction cost line. So that would go up. So all things being considered, unless the construction cost goes down, that excluded column is going to be $11,628,310. So I just want everybody to understand how the math works. And again, I know I did that fast, and it's a little bit counterintuitive in some respects. So, and as I said, if we brought the construction cost down significantly by over $2.5 million, and at that point the excluded costs were about $13.9. So the excluded costs have come down and will come down. But if you shift some of your costs for your scope to your building, your scope costs would go down, but that other excluded costs would go up. So that's just, again, how the mathematics work, and I know I'm going to get questions on that at the end. Moving along to the next line is the greenhouse line, and that would be excluded. That's the estimated cost of the greenhouse, including the markups. And then, as I said, the next items were the utility cost, which is $25,000 would be excluded because they expect you to get whatever services to the property. Testing services are reimbursable. That's $120,000. Getting on to page 3 of the 11 by 17 sheet, the last item is mailing and moving, and again, that one would be excluded as well. Furnishing equipments, we've used the numbers they have, so there are no exclusions for those. That's $984,000 for furnishings and equipment. Equipment's blank, but it's included in the furnishings line, and computer equipment is $984,000. This all adds up to a project budget before the contingencies of $70,622,689. Of those, when you total the excluded costs, it's a total of $12,023,310. What they then do on the left there is you'll see that the total project budget, they take out the excluded costs and they come up with an estimated total facilities grant number, and that's $58,599,379. They then take your reimbursement rate and multiply it against that. So if you look over to the right, we've lined out what your reimbursement rate is. It has a base rate of 53.53 of eligible reimbursable cost, and then you get 4.72 incentive points. 1.72 is for maintenance. That goes between 0 and 2, and the MSBA assigns that number, and they come out and they've evaluated your maintenance of your buildings. Most of the ones I've seen are about 1%. You have 1.72, which means you're doing an excellent job maintaining your buildings, because that's higher than what I've typically seen, usually around 1%. So you're doing a good job maintaining, which is important, obviously, for maintaining for the future as well. And you get 1.72 there. You're getting an additional 1% for the CM at risk. Part of that goes to pay that pre-construction cost. And then you get 2% for green schools. We have to meet the requirements for the green schools program to do that. That gives you 4.72. You add that to your base rate, you come up with 58.25. That's on your eligible reimbursement cost, and that comes up with a maximum grant before contingencies of $34,134,138. They then allow 5% to the question asked earlier, 5% of the construction cost for potentially eligible construction contingency, and 1% for the soft cost contingency, which is another total of $3,613,082. Some of those might not be reimbursed, so we're aware of that. But if they were all reimbursed and you spent all of them, both of those are probably not going to occur. But if those were to occur, that would increase your maximum grant to $36,238,758, and increase your total project budget to $74,235,771. If you have that, that would be your maximum project cost. And that would be the number that the Board of Selectmen will eventually have to appropriate, as well as your town meeting. And the local share would be the differential between the maximum grant, and that would be $37,997,012. Apologize because I'm doing a lot of talking here. I needed to get some water there. So the local share, the effective reimbursement rate is then 48.8%. So that's just taking the maximum grant divided by the total. Your local share is somewhat of a minimum in some respects, but it's what's complicated about this is the maximum state grant is the maximum they're going to reimbursing you. So if the costs come in over, then that's all on the locality. But obviously on this kind of project, we have to build to the budget, so it's not going to come in over the $74,235,000. We have to make sure it stays under that. But if it were to go over, the agreement says that you would pay the differential. If it comes under, the state will take away their pro rata share of anything under. Now, we have confirmed that since you're over the 275, until you get to the 275, or in this case, because of the hazmat, to 291, that they will not take away any money. All of it will be your savings until they get to that number, and then they will take away their pro rata share. So they do take away their share when it's part of theirs, but if it goes over, it's on you. That is the way the program works, unfortunately. But I make that clear to everybody. I also make it clear to everybody that these are potentially eligible contingency costs. So we're very careful to monitor. One way to think of this is, of the $3.6 million, a little bit less than half of that is the states, and a little bit more than half of that is, actually a little bit more than half of that is the states, because they have no exclusions yet on that. And so only half of it is the town. So if for some reason you did want additional scope, we know that's not reimbursable, and you need to divide the money into two pots of money, because you will, if you spend your share and have to stay within the total, you lose the state piece of that. So again, it's likely that the total project budget will eventually be less than the total, just the way the mechanics of all of this work. So that's how the MSBA funds this. They ask you to appropriate the total, but they do not want you to bond any more than your share. So, and the other nice thing about the new MSBA program is they will reimburse you on a monthly basis. So you do need a little more than your share of every month to cover that float, so to speak, but they are reimbursing you within 15 days after you file for reimbursement, and they have been doing that to date on the feasibility study as well. The other piece of paper we've given you is a sheet that has pink and yellow over here. This is a detailed breakdown of the cost estimates, and we have, I think, one copy of another 40 pages that breaks it down further, but these are the various line items the MSBA requires. We do this for this stage. This is the important stage that they set the numbers at. I will, however, tell you, to confuse things even more, this is called uniformat, and when you build a building, they use something called CSI, and it has slightly different categories. They're the same kind of thing, but a little bit different. We will be required to do further cost estimates throughout the design in that format, and we will submit that. You'll see that as well as the MSBA. And they will then reconfigure this at the time of what's called the Guaranteed Maximum Price, GMP, into those categories. But what won't change is we need to live with the construction budget total as we've stated it, which not including the greenhouse is the $60,261,632. So this is the way the process works. This sheet is before them also. Yes. And then in order to reach that number, there was some VE items, what's called value engineering, that we went through. There's one that has dollars on it, and then there's one that's the second page gives it in a more bullet form, a little more descriptive terms. Those were taken in order to stay within the range that we said. So those items are included within, and those are part of the drawings that the MSBA will see. As we go through the process, we will set this budget. We will now have to do what I call build the budget. So the budget is the budget. We're not going to come in for more money later on. We need to stay within this, and we will monitor the design and do further cost estimates going through. And Charlie here will do very detailed drawings. Right now we have what's called schematic design, but every little piece of the building needs to be put on drawings so that the CM and all of their subcontractors know exactly what to bid. If it's not in the documents, it doesn't get built. The nice thing about having a CM on board is they will review those documents as we go through the design process, and you get a lot less change orders, as we've talked about previously with the CM process. With that, I'm going to open this up to questions. I know I presented a lot of information very, very quickly, and I know it's complicated, so I want to make sure that anybody has any questions that I'm able to answer those, as well as Greg or Christine or Charlie, and Mike Kearns is here from Shawmut Design and Construction as well. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Mr. Chair. Jeff, this great explanation. Good start, very complicated, obviously. My question is of a general nature. What choices do we have, if any, that would have an impact on the total construction cost of $60 million or so?
If you put back anything you took off the value engineering list, that'd obviously go higher. If you looked at the drawings, which I think has been made available to you on different websites, and you took things out, if there were elements, if there was elements of scope you felt was unnecessary and you took them out, the cost would come down. If there were items of materials you thought different materials would be sufficient, change of flooring tiles, that kind of thing, changing curbing, changing roof materials, those kinds of things. You have to, whatever we do, it has to have a general life of 50 years, or our roofing, it doesn't last 50 years, but there are materials that don't last 50 years. But this is a durable, intended to be easy to maintain kind of building. But there are some choices in those kinds of materials. So if you have specific questions I can ask, I can also ask Charlie to give you some examples of things that are in the building that could potentially come out of the building if, again, we have tried to make this building the most cost-effective building that we can. So there aren't a lot of things, but there are some things too.
Well, before you answer, Charlie, you said there were generally two categories, scope and then materials.
Yes.
And I think it would be helpful if we had either visibility or some way of gaining a better understanding of what some of those choices are, either from a scope perspective or, the specific materials that we're talking about. I don't think we want to compromise the potential life or the integrity of the building in terms of materials. But if there are things from a scope perspective that we can reconsider, it would be good to understand what those are.
Well, the only comment, it's a little hard to follow, the difference between scope and material, but the building probably won't get any smaller. And fundamentally, the way you make a building less expensive is you make it smaller, and we're probably not in a position to do that, because I think we've worked very hard to develop a program within the MSBA guidelines that meets your needs, and it's hard to imagine how we're going to make the building much smaller. So that's probably not open to us. We can look at materials. I will say that there's not any gold-plated materials right now in this estimate. We have already we've done a pretty robust round of value engineering already relative to materials. We can probably find a few more things that could be modified to reduce costs, and we're happy to list those out for you as best we can. But there isn't. It's pretty basic. It's pretty typical. It's acoustical ceiling tiles, it's vinyl flooring tiles typically, it's brick on the jumbo brick on the exterior, it's EPDM on the roof, it's aluminum windows, and there also are a lot of things that for instance, if we do want to get those 2 reimbursement points for sustainability, we are required to have very high performance envelope, which means we have a lot of insulation, we have very high grade windows, we have fairly sophisticated systems relative to controls and condensing boilers and things. So we are locked into a lot of technology just to meet the sustainability goals that we won't be able to change. And then in terms of site scope, again, it's to meet your program, there may be a few site items we can modify. But if you want to have the 2 fields and the associated, fencing and bleachers and all, those are kind of already sort of locked in too. And obviously the roadways are the roadways. And we could look at, we have a fire lane that goes around the back of the building that's asphalt. We could look at making it crushed stone or something. There are those kind of decisions we could obviously look at that can certainly help around the margins.
We definitely, the complicating thing is we can't cut square footage because it's part of the MSBA requirements. So it's really in the do one less field kind of thing. That's what we've seen elsewhere. Put less fencing, don't put bleachers, those are kinds of things. Again, we charged the Taipei Associates early on, don't design something and then take it out. Design the most cost-effective building. So at this point, there aren't a lot of choices in that regard, but there are, as I said, there are some.
Well, I think that's important to understand, that we're going in with an estimate that's based on a fairly tight set of assumptions in terms of the scope of the project to meet the needs of an 820 student population, as well as some of the choices that have already been made to reduce the materials without compromising the integrity of the design.
I think that's a fair statement.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? We'll open it for public comment. I just want to make sure that I got the board first.
So just to kind of echo in what Mark has said and what we've kind of discussed, we haven't gotten into discussions about some of these specifics. I think we need to do that. I think if someone's sitting at home and they're hearing these numbers, they're wondering, How did we get here? And it's been a good explanation. Obviously, we don't want to compromise on the quality. We don't want to compromise on the efficiency. We don't want to compromise on the useful life of the products. But, we do need to talk about, number of fields, how well they're fitted out, if they all have bleachers, if they all have fences, do we need all that? I know we prefer that, but can we make some choices there? Talked about the block, more detail on what the block is for the exterior walls. I mean, if we can take 10% out of exterior walls even, it's significant numbers. So I think we really need to get into some details specifically so, it's clear to everybody that we've done everything we can to get this number as low as we can, and that we can minimize, the district share of this, the local share of this. It's a big number, it jumps out. And, some of that is State House math. It's wonderful there's a 58.25% reimbursement rate. However, 25% of that or 24% of that's excluded because they carry a different base cost outside of what the market is. So we just need to make sure we're getting everything out of this we can. We need to make sure we just go further. I know you guys put a lot of work into this. I know you've looked at costs. I know you've put a great effort into this. But we need to do more because the numbers are just, they're jarring, quite honestly. I know we're in the total cost range we expected to be in, but again, it's the district share that's really hurts. And we just need to make sure if we're going to go to the voters and ask for their money for this, that everyone's comfortable that we've done everything we can to protect them.
Colleen?
I'm just looking at the value engineering sheet that's here. Could somebody just go through that?
Sure.
Just for, people at home who don't have this in front of them, or?
Sure. I don't know if it's better to use first page or second page. You want to run through that?
Yeah, it was
they're
the second
different.
page I was looking at, yeah.
Okay, but they're actually different. They're different items. This is two different
Okay, right.
rounds of value engineering. But I will go through it very quickly. I'll do the first page and then the second page.
Yeah, just so people have some idea of the things that you've already.
Right, okay. And let me just preface this by saying that some of these, I can't take all your time to go through every one of these in detail. I'll go through them quickly. Some of these were in the drawings, and we came back and revisited them. We got recommendations from Shawmut Design and Construction. We got recommendations from our cost estimator. We went through with our engineers, with every consultant, and reviewed all of these. Some of these were decisions that were put into the drawings that we felt comfortable could be eliminated. And that's why we went through this exercise, in the interest of paring this down as far as we could. On the first page, copper to aluminum feeders, this ended up being taken out as a kind of lump sum reduction in the electrical square foot number. And what happened with that exercise, and you'll see it come back through 2 or 3 times, so I'll explain it at the beginning. The estimators felt like the initial electrical square foot number looked higher than what they were seeing coming out of the marketplace. In other words, they did an estimate, they looked at it, they said, for building this size, other jobs, we're seeing $1 less a square foot. You have to understand they do this in a bunch of different ways. They go through the building and they do the best they can to do a takeoff. They also look at their database from the other schools. And PM&C, Shawmut's doing a lot of school work. PM&C does more public school estimating than any other estimator in Massachusetts. They have they're very good, they're very accurate, they have an enormous database. So they're seeing all the time. They just opened a job the other day, bids in East or West Bridgewater. So they're seeing what the market is telling them. And so they do sort of triangulate in terms of just looking at overall square foot numbers and going, all right, we think that's high or low. So that was taken out as part of the electrical reduction. We reduced the height of the gym roof, which obviously takes envelope costs out of the job. We had roof screening around some of the mechanical units just to hide them. It's not an acoustical issue, it's a visual issue. We felt that hopefully the sight lines will not be such that you see rooftop units up there. You don't have to have that. It's a nice to have, not a have to have. Lightning protection was also under the auspices of electrical. Lightning protection is something the engineers put in. It's not a requirement. It's not a code requirement. Some owners want it, so it goes into the electrical engineer's scope typically. Initially, it's often taken out in moments like this. We can keep it in, or we can remove it. That's a discussion we can have later, but it sort of fell under the reduction, overall reduction. We we had a spec that called for triple glazed glass. We decided that if we used a film instead, we can take out the triple glaze and put in double glazed windows and still get enough performance to meet chips. The substitute metal panels for a different material, we went with a cementitious panel instead of a metal panel, and that reduces costs. We do have some places where you have to have panels, you know, it's above the gym windows and things. You have such major expanses that it doesn't make sense to put in masonry. Propest fitting, there was a conversation about what kind of fittings to use. This is industry standard and is appropriate. We looked at the steel number and talked to the engineer at some length about the steel number. They felt like certain aspects of the steel could be reduced in terms of a pound per square foot number, which is really how these jobs are figured at this stage. It's not fully engineered, but you're looking at what's a typical job, what's steel per square foot on a typical job of this size and scale. We also reduced the slab. The slab on grade was 5 inches. We reduced that to 4 inches. The engineer's comfortable with that. We had shown metal roof on the pitched roofs. We changed that to a shingle roof, which we still will get a good lifespan on. Maybe not quite as much as metal, but it's an appropriate choice. We reduced the amount of glass. We simply went back through the elevations and reduced window sizes and storefront sizes. We had we had some wood ceiling systems that in the media center and a little bit in the corridors. We just took that out and went with acoustical ceiling tile. That's a nice to have. It's not a have to have. That's an aesthetic thing. You won't notice the difference in the end. We had interior wood paneling that we reduced significantly. Again, that's an aesthetic thing. It's not a maintenance thing. We had 3 elevators. We took 1 elevator out. We can still make the building fully accessible with 2 elevators. We reduced the amount of science room casework, not dramatically. That's not a big take, but we felt like we could do that and still fully outfit the science labs. The landscape plans showed some concrete paving around the entrance, and we took that out. We're just going to go with standard concrete sidewalks instead of pavers. Pavers are attractive and can have a very long lifespan, but you don't have to have them. On the second page, I've talked about the take we took out of electrical, just as a general value engineering based on the opinion of Shawman and based on the opinion of PM&C. In landscape, they had shown sloped granite curbs at a lot of the parking areas, and we've changed that to an asphalt berm. This is not at sidewalks, and it's not on roadways where we've maintained the granite curbing, because I think that's really important. Always comes up as a value engineering item. I always fight against it. The few jobs where we've done precast concrete curbs have been a disaster, because they just plows, and you get plenty of snow here. The plows really beat them up. So I think it's okay to use asphalt berm in parking areas where it can be repaired, but I don't think you want to do it at a sidewalk, and I don't think you want to do it on your roadways. So just a little editorial comment. There are some fieldstone walls shown in the landscape plans. We reduced that by 20%. There was at the practice field on Mass Ave. This is not the 2 competition fields. The practice field at Mass Ave, the original plans did show a gravel drainage subbase and did show irrigation. And we said, we don't think that's the intent of the owners. I think the owner wants a serviceable recreational soccer field. We don't need a competition field. And they said, fine, take the gravel subbase out, take the irrigation out. We still have the good draining fields with the irrigation of the 2 competition fields, but not that practice field that we added the scope on. We had shown a pad for a future storage building. We thought that if you're going to do the future storage building in the future, you could probably do the pad when you did the storage building, and you don't have to do it as part of this project. We discussed the issue around Propest and around some of the specification items. I talked about lightning protection. On architectural, we did clarify some issues around where we had to have fireproofing, just for the purposes of the discussion with the estimator. The estimator had shown acoustical block in the gym. We didn't need it. It was something that was in their estimate that we felt was not required. We do need acoustical treatment in the gym, but it can be applied panels. It doesn't have to be in the block. A acoustical block has actually got a cellular with insulation in the block. It's not necessary. We'll apply panels to the wall, and that will deaden the sound in there. We had some column covers that were metal. We don't need them. We can do them in gypsum wallboard. The hardwood diffusers in the theater, there are diffusers on the wall to brighten the sound. We have sound deadening panel. We have 3 different things in the theater. We have diffuser panels to brighten the sound. We have acoustical panels to deaden the sound, and we have panels sort of up near the proscenium to actually bounce the sound around. And this is all designed by an acoustician. And we thought we had shown too much, and we talked to the acoustician about this. We'd had too much of the quite expensive diffusers in the front, so we took some of that out. We reduced the amount of paneling at the media center. We do have some wood paneling in the media center. We reduced it significantly. We could take it all. That's a decision you could make. We could take it out entirely. We don't have to have wood paneling in the library. We could have just drywall. We also had acoustical wood paneling at the corridors. We reduced that significantly. We can do fabric-covered panels instead of wood panels. Again, that's an aesthetic thing, that is not fundamentally a performance thing. We can get the same performance out of a fabric-covered panel as we can out of a wood panel, and the fabric-covered panels are considerably less. We did, in lieu of some of the wood paneling, we put back some porcelain tile on the walls. That's not a big add. And then we did have one, in the original plan, we'd had a couple, I think we had one skylight over the band room, but we moved, in the new plan, we moved the band room and no longer needed a skylight because we have windows. So we can just take that line item out. And then we clarified some of the points around markups, because we did have a discussion with Shamit about some of the markups around. We ended up not one of those we changed, one of them we didn't in the final analysis. This was an internal memo that went to our cost estimator. In the end, we reduced the project requirements, but not the general conditions. And we modified escalation slightly, and we modified the pricing and GMP contingency slightly. The whole thing together is at 10%, which is a reasonable number. So those are all those items. So we have gone through and tried to get out. There are probably a few more items like this in the estimate still that we could get out. It's not a dramatic number, but there are probably some more items we can attack, and we're happy to do that.
Thank you for going through that.
Okay.
Other questions? Nathan? Could you get to a microphone?
Sure. Just a follow-up question on the value engineering items. So just so I understand the numbers. So there's 2 columns here, trade cost and with markups on the sheet. All right, so the total savings from the value engineering, is that the sum of those 2 columns? So
no, it's the 1.6 million, and
okay.
then and furthermore, there were items on the second page that aren't on the first page. So the reality is that the actual VE exercise was significantly more than 1.6. It was more like 2.6.
Yeah. You can see the dates on it, Nathan. We did the first round,
And then
which
we
got
did a
us to the
second round.
1.6, and then we decided to do the second round, which is the second page.
okay.
We
we
started around 66 million, we ended up at 60,261,000. So there was, some of it was clarifying scope, and then some of it was value engineering. So it was a series of, a process over several weeks.
Okay, and you said the total was 6 million altogether?
Well, we started around 66 million, and
64.
and then we clarified to about 60, I think it was 63, 725 was once we got some of the bugs out of, oh, no, there's not that much steel, it's this, it's that. And then we brought it down from there to the 60,261,000. So we took out about a little over 3.5 million.
That was through your value engineering?
Through the value engineering. Some of it was clarification of the scope. It's hard to, you sit with, your first thing you do is, the 2 estimators talk to one another and say, oh, I carried this, and they say, and with Charlie's folks in the room saying, oh, no, but there's not this. So some of that was clarification of scope,
Right,
and
we
not
got
something taken.
3.5 million
Total, but you're not seeing.
came out
Yeah, but you're not seeing it all on these sheets. These sheets happen to be the lists that were developed around the stuff that was memorialized as we went through these second and third iterations. The initial meeting that Jeff just mentioned, which was, is always about a 6 or 7 or 8 hour meeting, a lot of that wasn't memorialized. It was just the estimates were clarified and modified. And, the estimators and Shawmut both tend to be a little bit conservative because what they err on the side of leaving it in before they take it out. So part of the exercise of one of those meetings is to say, no, that's right, take it out. Or they say, well, can we take it out? And we call our engineer on the phone and say, can we do this? And they say yes or no. So some of that's not even listed. It just happened.
To be clear and fair, the value engineering is probably around 2 to 2.4 million, something in that range is what we would really call value engineering. The other stuff was scope clarifications and that kind of thing.
Nathan?
With that, so these items, are these, let's say the 2.4 million or whatever the figure is that pre-reimbursement, non-excluded? Or was there excluded items that were included in that reduction?
Since we are over the 275 or the 293 by the amount that we are, one could perceive that all of the things are in the exclusion category. Because if you were to reduce, if you were to add back in the $2.4 million, 100% of that would be borne locally.
Gotcha.
So similarly, if you were to take anything out at this point, if you took a $100,000 item out, you get $100,000 back off the local share.
Thanks for explaining. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? All right, as a path forward, what we are tasked with tonight, as you know, is that on Thursday, we're expecting a submission to the MSBA of the approval of the schematic design and cost estimate. Now, through our discussion tonight, it's clear that we also want to go back and take a look more deeply at the numbers and to see whether there's further areas that we can find some cost savings. As a suggested path forward, what I'd like to do is to task a work group that will work with the designer and the project manager to that end, to question numbers in such a way that we are clear that we are still providing, a quality program at the best cost that we possibly can. But at the end, so there are two things that I'd like to suggest that we do tonight. One of which is to approve the schematic design and cost estimate, knowing that anything that we take out between now and before the MSBA meeting in November is money that will be coming back to the town, and would keep us on schedule to present to the voters. Is there any objections to that as a path forward?
No objection to that, but I know Bond Council has had an opportunity to look at some of these numbers as well, and I was wondering if Mrs. Spidell might be able to join us and review that information, because I think that's important information for the committee to have as well.
Sure.
I'll just stay here since there's a microphone here. Okay, so just to be clear, would you repeat what you want me to go through?
Well, I think you know, when we're out talking about this project and talking about the local share costs versus what MSBA, and we're getting more clarity on that as we go through this process. But I know the question that I frequently hear is, what does that mean for me as a taxpayer?
All right. So we did have the town's financial advisor look at this and did ask him to put together models based on the $37.5 million local share. And we looked at both a 20-year and a 30-year financing of this project. Municipal projects are typically financed for 20 years, but it is common with school projects and large utility projects that they go out to 30 years as well, which is why we looked at both of those. And so the model for the 20-year, we looked at, because of the size of the project and when we will need the funds, that we would be doing 2 different borrowings for this project. And so we made an assumption that we would be borrowing at 4 and 4.5%, which is quite a bit higher than what we could borrow right now. Right now, we could be borrowing in the 3 to 4 range. But this project, the permanent financing of this is at some point in the future, so we want it to be conservative. So over a 30-year life, we could expect that the cost to the average homeowner, and the average home is $248,000 assessed valuation, would be about around $650 per home. And it fluctuates, but we would be doing, essentially be doing a level payment on this, which again is a little bit different. Typically we do a level principal where the payments are higher in the beginning when the principal is higher, but lower as we pay that off. But we do this flat, similar to what you pay in a mortgage. So we'd be looking at about $650. And then, I'm doing this backwards. I'm looking at a really small, so I want to make sure I'm giving you the right. Okay, so I'm sorry, that was the 20-year. The 30-year, we would be looking at about $525 and about $650 for the 20-year. And then if we were to finance the way we do with other projects where the payment is higher, we do a level principal, we'd be looking at a much higher amount, which wouldn't make sense for this. So there's a pretty minimal difference between the 20 and 30 year to the average homeowner, but there would be a huge additional charge and increase to carry at that 10 years. So at this level, I think it probably makes a lot more sense to be looking at 20-year rather than 30-year.
So going to 30 years added about $10 million overall total cost, if my memory's right?
So over 20 years, we would be paying back about $56.7 million. Over 30 years, we'd be paying back about 66.7. So yeah. So just for that less than $100 a year to the average taxpayer, we'd be paying about $10 million more in interest costs.
Yeah, the fast math on that as I was doing it would be that the 20-year would be about $52.50 a month to the average homeowner. When we say average, is that mean or median? I'm just curious.
It's average.
Which is mean.
And we can put together, similar to what we did with the override when we were talking about that amount, we broke it down. We had a spreadsheet that showed for each of the different valuation categories how many homes fell into those ranges, and we certainly can do that, update that, and do that again.
Are there questions on this one, Nathan?
Yeah, just a quick one. Thanks, Carrie, for those numbers. That's really valuable. I'm wondering, just for a little perspective, if you happen to have these numbers with you, just to help us ballpark, like what kind of change that would be for that average homeowner, or that, whatever you want to call that. You're talking $650 per year in additional taxes now. What do you think the baseline is right now for that homeowner in terms of their annual taxes?
I believe the average homeowner is paying about $4,000 a year.
Okay. And you've talked before about how the phasing in of these payments relates to the phasing out of some payments for some other projects the town's carrying right now. In terms of impact on this same average homeowner, do you have a sense of, like timeline and when some of those other payments would start to come off to sort of?
I can put that together. I can't give you that information without looking at it. We do have debt service starting to fall off in 2017, which is about the time that we would be looking to permanently finance at least part of this, or we would be well into the borrowing at 2017. But I'd have to go back and look at that. I mean, they're under no circumstances is this going, what's coming off is not going to come close to what would be going on.
And that's great that you look it up later. Do you have a gut sense? Is it like a tenth or a third, or just if you had to guess, what would your guess?
I would say less than 25%.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
So the other debt for the other buildings that we're currently paying for, I think is pretty well retired by 2025.
I think it's 25 or 23. I think it might be 23.
24, so we'll average.
Half a year in 23 and a full year in 24.
Okay, so there's some relief. It starts coming off. All the other deferred buildings come off the books. But there's a few years of heavy lifting, to be sure.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Carrie. And I believe Senator Rogers had a question?
Thank you, my buddy Cruz is Thank you. My name is Dave Rogers. I live at 82 Highland Street, and I really appreciate all of the work that you've done to bring this project to this particular position. I wanted to make a couple of editorials, comments, and I have some specific questions. So why don't we first start with the specific questions. In the miscellaneous project cost, utility-free testing and moving, you have a cost of $120,000 for testing, okay? Why is it that we have to pay for testing? Why don't we say to the contractor, this is the spec, make sure you do it, and test it and bring us documentation that this is the deal?
Several reasons. One, we want it to be independent. Secondly, we're using a CM at risk model, so whatever the contractor pays, they're going to send us the bills anyway. So we're going to see, this is not a general contracting approach. So whatever is part of their cost, we're going to see their costs. So if they save money, the town saves money. So if they did the testing, the bills would eventually be passed on to the town anyways. So, but the certain requirements of the building department and the building code require independent testing. We have to provide those reports to the building commissioner, and the MSBA as well requires that documentation. So this is the standard way that it's done, but again, and it's not, there are, as you indicate, there are some parts of the spec that they do provide those testing to us. This is primarily concrete cylinders, the anchor bolts for the steel going up, and compaction testing, window testing, that kind of thing.
No, I am perfectly cognizant of the fact that this is just $120,000, but I want to bring to everybody's attention a discussion that Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois, I remember it like it happened yesterday. He got up on the Senate floor and said, you know, $1 million here, $1 million there, pretty soon you're talking real money. And we're talking real money here, so I appreciate that. But I don't want you to think that I'm really picky on $120,000 and we're talking a $70 million project here. How much will it cost for the construction drawings? And where is that located?
Basic services for the construction documents part, there are different lines. It's in the summary sheet that you have. It's included in the $5,175,000 number, which is the third line.
Yep.
And included within that, the construction documents themselves is $1,674,750. But those are the final drawings themselves, but the design development phase is $717,750. Construction documents is $1,167,400, and then bidding is $239,000. So that comprises the documents and then putting them out to bid.
Okay. Quick math tells me if you take $1,717,000 and we already paid $250,000 for schematics, right? You're talking a lot of dough.
Yes, you are, but on industry standards, it's actually less than the industry standard for what we have for this project.
If you go down this line on the right-hand side that you provided with us, starting with the feasibility study, the $750,000, administration $1.9 million, architecture and engineering $5.175. Pre-construction services $1.6 million. I mean,
160.
Sorry, 160,000. Sorry, 5, 6, 7, almost $8 million. Unbelievable. From my humble little abode at 82 Highland Street, to pay $8 million to have this building done, and to have a feasibility study, to spend $750,000 to see if we should do it. I mean, it's just, you know, these costs to the average citizen, and I'm below average because I'm not that smart, are just unbelievable. So I echo the remarks that we've got to drill down on these things and really take a look at them and present them in an understandable manner. You know, you're a pro, I could tell the minute I saw you and the minute you started talking. And as I said, I'm just a poor country boy from Lunenburg, and you started, and you lost me, I was telling you, and it was like, you know, okay, you know, here we go. So the point is, I'm sure there are a lot of people a lot smarter than me, and they'll catch it on real quick, but for those of us that are not, I think this thing has to be, you know, presented in such a way that we can understand it. Cost of drawings, Everett Dirksen. Oh, now I'm going to get into my philosophical real quick. The folks down in Boston, in their infinite wisdom, come up and say that we should be able to build this for $275 a foot, correct?
They now phrase that as their participation rate of what they feel that they will participate in construction.
Regardless of what it costs.
Regardless of what it costs, although they're cognizant there's a nexus between the two, but this is what they will participate in the funding of them.
And this was a figure that was set up a few years ago.
It was set up that number was set about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago.
Okay. And when we go out to bid on this, okay, and go to construction, it's what, a 3 or 4 year period?
We hope to go out to construction late next year, so
Okay.
about a year from now.
Okay, and when do you think it'll be done?
It'll be open for
September 2016.
September
16, couple years.
Well, the project will be done, but the school will be open. We'll still have some
We
site.
still have to
work and things
demo
to do.
the existing building.
Okay, so, I mean, and I don't know about you folks, but it's my considered opinion, that there's only one way that expenses are going to go, and that's up. So if we think that we can build this for this number, I think we're crazy.
Let me just clarify, there is money built into this for some escalation. That's the 3% escalation plus the 7% design contingency. There's about 10% built in here for contingencies for that exact purpose. So,
3% in total?
10% in total for, that's not all, the escalation number is 1,479,000. So it's about 1.5 million to anticipate, because as I said earlier, the budget will be the budget. We have to stay within that budget. Even if cost goes up, we have to figure out a way. So there's some money built in here to allow for what you're just suggesting.
Okay, and you said something for a design contingency?
Well, the drawings, the building is not fully designed yet. That's what we'll spend the next year doing, and the committee was going to be carefully reviewing all the cost and aspects. So there's about 5% built into the fact that the drawings aren't 100% done, and when you actually draw every piece of this, and part of the reason for those costs is when you build in the public sector, you have to draw every piece of the building, and you can't just, say, well, we think it's this. We have to actually draw it all. That's part of the reason it costs as much as it does.
You don't have a CAD CAM?
CAD CAM?
Computer-aided design?
Yeah, it'll be
Boom.
designed using computer-aided design, yes.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that in the private sector, you can go out and you can say, I want you to build this room, we're going to have some flooring, and you don't have to draw every little piece of it. In the public sector, you have to draw every piece of it. You have to show exactly what's where. If you don't do that, that's where somebody says, oh, I thought it was this, not that.
Yeah.
In the private sector, it's a little bit different. So in this model, we have to draw it all out. So it will take a good part of a year to get the full thing fully designed. Once you do that, the estimators are estimating what they believe the drawings include. They estimate what's in the drawings plus things that they know will be in a building, but we allow about 5% extra for things that hadn't yet been drawn.
Okay, so in layman's terms, the $1,674,750 for design,
Yes.
There's a contingency to increase that.
There's a contingency for the construction costs that result from that design. Now, there is not a contingency. The design costs are going to be set. Okay. There's a contingency for, we think there's going to be extra construction costs because we know we have to stay within budget. Exactly to the issue you raised a minute ago, which is that the costs will go up. We're cognizant of that, and we're planning for that so that we don't go over budget.
Okay. Thank you. My last comment is this, that I think at some particular point in time, as just a regular Joe taxpayer, would like to hear the economic analysis for the maintenance of this new facility. It's 167,000 square feet, which is huge. I know that we're doing some things with schools, and I know that it's new, and I know that we're going to do some things to save money for electricity, but I also know about Unitil, and I know what you're doing, try to be sophisticated and stuff, but there's no way that as I stand here, I can't tell you in good conscience that things are going to stay the same. I think that they're going to increase. So I would like to know, at the end of the day, when it's presented at town meeting, what the bottom line is. All things considered, and all the contingencies taken care of, and all of the what-ifs and this and that, and where you left me at the second sentence that you said. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. Again, thank the committee for what they do, and I'll look forward to a complete analysis and a complete presentation before town meeting. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman? Just want
Yes, Mr. Matthews.
quickly thank Mr. Rogers for pointing out, yes, costs are going up dramatically, and we need to get in front of this. This isn't something that we can kick down the road and come back to in a few years. Number one, we have a window of opportunity with the MSBA, which is limited. We can't walk away then jump back in line, and the longer this is delayed, the more it's going to cost folks. So we got to start wrapping our heads around that. And he makes all good points about future maintenance costs, utility costs, et cetera, that's all going to be part of the mix. So look forward to having that conversation further.
Thank you. At this time, what I'd like to have a discussion around before we proceed to any motions on the schematic and the cost estimate is around the work of a working group. And this is, I haven't had a chance to discuss this with, frankly, anybody at this point, but I was trying to think about it after the, thinking about some of the concerns around the cost, is that it would make sense if I got volunteers from Mr. Matthews and Mr. Erickson to be a part of a working group that will take a look at some of the more in-depth, kind of drill down a little bit further, assisted by the superintendent and the principal, so that we know that we're not compromising quality, and assisted by the project manager and the designer.
I would want to drag in Mr. Roy, because he has relevant...
you might say that.
That's why you're here, man. He brings a greater skill set, I think, than...
I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Chair, what's the time frame for that work effort?
This is my hope, that we have this opportunity to run these two tracks while we have this window of opportunity. That the MSBA will be meeting the November 20th.
Is November.
And that sometime prior to that, we could come up with some measure of cost savings or, comfort about what's in there, what's not in there. And that would inform, in other words, we can always have our costs reduced. We can't ever have our costs go up.
Right.
So we have an opportunity to work on some cost reductions at this point prior to the MSBA meeting.
So it's between now and that MSBA meeting
Correct.
of November 20?
Correct.
Okay. I was concerned that you was looking for something more immediate than that. I have some constraints in the
I think
next
we
week
just
or
need
so.
to check the time frame too, though, Mike, I think.
We might be needing a week ahead of that or 10 days ahead of that. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, if I could, the board meeting will be November 20th. The staff will have what's called a project scope and budget conference with several members of your committee, plus the design team and the management team, and that will occur a few weeks before that November 20th. We don't have an exact date on that yet. And that is about the time they lock that down. My suggestion, if I could give a suggestion
Absolutely.
to the committee, is that you have this meeting with this working group in the next week or two, after you review the drawings and look at all the stuff we've done. We can give you the full back up the cost estimates and make suggestions. There will be a second bite of this in some respects. That will set the dollar numbers. That will set the amount you have at town meeting. But during design development, there will be further questions about materials and the kinds of things we're having. So I think that you may have some immediate suggestions that we work into this meeting with the staff at the MSBA, and then we'll set a number. But I think also this group might want to meet again during the design development phase of the project as well. And some things that we decided to leave in for now, just in case, you might come up with some further suggestions in that second tier activity, but that would obviously be after town meeting, but I think would also be helpful to us as well.
Great. All right, so I'll take a motion that we appoint a working group of the composition that we described.
You available?
I am generally not available until the week of the 14th. After that, my availability is fairly flexible.
Okay.
But I'm not available the remainder of this week and all of next.
If we began work during that period of time, would that be problematic for you? Because we could absolutely keep you informed of what our activity is during that period of time.
If that work entails briefing and gaining a better understanding of the current assumptions and issues of that like, I wouldn't have any trouble with it starting.
Okay. And you could always, of course, if we were to do something within that time period, you could take a look at the materials and also provide your input by email.
I'd be more than willing to do that.
That'd be great. Okay, so, I'm sorry, I was going to take a motion.
So moved.
A second? Second. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Great. We now move on to, I'm accepting a motion to approve the schematic design and cost estimate. Does this need to be in any particular language for the MSBA?
I think what we'd like you to do is to authorize submittal of the schematic design package as prepared by Tepe Associates, and per the budget summary that you've identified here, we need to do that because they're going to get record of this meeting so that what they have is consistent. Obviously, if the working group makes some changes, then we will submit that as well later on. But for now, we're looking for approval of the schematic design package prepared by Tepe Associates and approval of the total project budget summary as indicated on that on the page.
So that's essentially what we're looking for. We're looking for approval of the schematic design as submitted by the Tepe Associates, including the schematic design total project budget. Correct?
Yes.
I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mackin.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you all. Next piece of business is, where am I? Here we are. Upcoming meetings. Our proposed next meeting is Wednesday, October the 23rd. Oh, and back to upcoming meetings. We were looking to schedule I was looking to schedule the working group sometime next week. Would next Monday work for you folks?
Monday, not at night.
You could do the afternoon. Okay. Do you have a
I thought we said the 10th. I thought we said the 10th.
10th?
The
Yeah.
10th before the finance.
Oh, okay.
Or something?
The 10th?
If you wanted to meet on the 10th, I could make myself available. I was counting my finance committee commitment as affecting my availability.
Oh, okay, so if we did a meeting before the finance committee, we could do that. That would work then.
Well, Mike, I just wanted to mention that we also were trying to schedule that project update recording.
Right.
at 5:30. If the working group could meet maybe at 3:30 or 4.
Does that work for folks?
That's going to be a bit of a challenge for me.
Or we could move the recording. I think that it takes more.
This will take precedence over the recording.
So if we could do 5:30, 5 or 5:30.
I could do 5 o'clock.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Working group, yep, 5 on the 10th.
They can't be available for 5:30.
Thank you.
The recording.
And I'm assuming that the place will be at TCP.
If we're going to try to do the recording after that, are you planning, what's the planned duration
I think
of
we're going to
that
try and
meeting?
figure out another date for the
Yeah.
recording,
We'll have
because
to
we
figure out
really
a
need to
date.
get this
Because
meeting
the
in.
finance committee is at 7.
Is at 7?
So
Yeah.
we'll find another date.
Could do it after the finance committee presentation.
Right.
If they're available later in the evening.
Yep. So we'll work on
We'll
that.
coordinate.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Public forums. We need to start, as I said, we've done a lot of meetings, but we need to think thoughtfully about starting the public forums now that we're at the stage where we have a better idea of what the scope of the project is and what the cost of the project is. In going forward, obviously, it would be something that we would want, the entire committee available for. So I think the easiest thing to start with is if we could get dates of non-availability. So if we could get those into, I guess that would go to me within the next, by Friday if we could, just give us an idea of when in the month of October folks are not available. We'll try and create a date around when the majority of us are available for it. That then will in effect be an additional meeting, but it will be a forum.
So you need dates that are not
Correct. Because I think it would be a benefit to have as many members as possible there. So I'm just going to gather up where everybody winds up on the schedule to see what the best date is. Does that?
So this is in addition to our meeting of the 23rd?
Correct.
It would be a similar time. It would be at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, I would imagine that for the first forum that we would do something that would be in a larger venue, such as the high school auditorium.
We have a regularly scheduled meeting on the 23rd.
We have a regularly scheduled meeting on the 20th. We're proposing to schedule a meeting on the 23rd. Unless there's a problem with that date.
Mr. Mackin, I'm assuming that the public forums will schedule for a location such as the auditorium at the high school?
I just said that, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll have to look at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think by October, we're getting into probably auditorium usage by the students in the evening.
Yes. Mhm. So Mr. Spadafino and I will work on that and begin to, one that jumps out, well, I don't know, we'll have to find one that jumps out.
So we'll keep all these moving
It's
parts, and, we'll,
yes.
Just,
Yep.
The forum is usually a school building committee forum. So in other words, you're holding it. So
Yes, exactly.
You could have a business meeting before or after.
Correct.
Rather than if and not have to have the 23rd. You could do them collectively. So.
right, no, I want to leave the 23rd as a date for our business if we don't have the time for it for the forum.
Okay, fine. Yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense.
So you might be able to do it on the same day.
Okay.
Okay,
I think you should figure a couple, maybe do one.
right.
Well, we were thinking that we would also look at doing some forums in smaller venues that on different times. Like the library community room at a certain weekend hour. But we're going to need to talk among ourselves to figure out how to make the schedule work for everybody.
Okay.
And you can send out a letter to parents, right? You'll be able to send a notice home with the kids.
Well, I think that also addresses the community outreach efforts. Is there any other business before the committee?
I'd suggest maybe want to do something at the Eagle House, maybe coordinate with,
We definitely should do something at the Eagle House, and I think the sooner the better on that one as well. So we'll
What's the
coordinate
Eagle
that.
House?
The Eagle House is our senior center. And probably the best time to catch people is the
After the
pancake?
pancake
Yeah,
breakfast.
when is that?
I believe it's the second Wednesday of the month, so I think it would be October 9th.
So it'd be a week from Wednesday.
Yes.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today. No, 1 week from today. 1 week from Wednesday.
Well, today's Monday. A week from Wednesday. I want it to be Wednesday already. So I think the pancake breakfast runs 8 to 11.
Okay, so we'll make contact with the folks over there. I mean, I don't want to, well, I also want to be thoughtful about it. If it winds up we have to wait for November on that, that's okay, but I'd rather get it sooner rather than later.
I agree.
And, you know, again, given the hour of the day, anybody that could make themselves available to participate would be greatly appreciated. So volunteers are greatly accepted.
Would that include pancakes then?
I'll buy you
You betcha. It's the best deal in town.
It's only $2, all you can eat.
Okay, any public comment? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you all.
One quick question. Can we just, who's the working group?